I want you to imagine, just for a moment, a world where the ultimate, like the most shocking act of rebellion you could possibly commit isn't staging some violent uprising.
Right.
It's not tearing down a government. It's not inciting a riot. It is simply stopping to save a stranger's life.
Which is, yeah, such a wild concept for us to wrap our heads around.
Totally wild. And that paradox is basically the entire beating heart of Michael Moorcock's The Ice Schooner, which is the exact focus of the massive literary analysis we are exploring
It
today.
is a dense one for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So we're looking at a comprehensive study. It's titled Navigating the Ice Schooner, a Moorcock masterpiece study. And the mission for this deep dive is to really pull apart the mechanics of this fascinating dying Earth story.
Yeah, because it's so much more than just a survival tale.
Exactly. We're going to examine how humanity adapts to absolute, just unrelenting environmental hostility. And we want to decode what this classic adventure quest actually reveals about our own search for meaning, during times in our lives that feel completely stagnant.
And I think setting the analytical framework early is super crucial here. Because, I mean, if you were to just glance at the cover art of this book,
Yeah, the old paperback covers with the giant ships.
right, or if you just read a one-sentence summary, you might assume you were looking at a standard pulpy science fiction adventure. A romp through the snow.
Just a fun action story.
Exactly. But the study we are dissecting makes it abundantly clear that this is a deeply psychological drama. I mean, it is a spiritual reckoning that just happens to be disguised as a nautical voyage across a frozen wasteland.
Disguise being the operative word there.
Yeah. It is atmospheric, it is incredibly heavy, and it forces us to ask some deeply uncomfortable questions about the underlying mechanisms of human nature and, morality itself.
Well, let's look at the baseline reality of this universe because the world building is just breathtakingly brutal.
Oh, it really is.
We are dropped into a post-apocalyptic, far future ice age. The Earth as we know it is entirely gone, like completely buried under a planetary sheet of ice.
A literal global freeze.
Yeah. And the analysis explicitly points out that this environment isn't just a passive backdrop for the characters to walk across. The ice itself functions as an active, omnipresent character.
Right. It's not just weather, it's a presence.
Exactly. It's described throughout the text as simultaneously beautiful and just fundamentally deadly. It's an entity that commands absolute respect from everyone.
And the study highlights how that specific environment dictates absolutely every facet of the society that lives on it. I mean, there is this concept central to their culture known as the Ice Mother.
Oh, right, the Ice Mother.
Yeah, she is this ambiguous central force in their world, functioning almost as a deity.
But not a nice one.
No, not at all. She's not a loving, nurturing mother figure in the traditional mythological sense. She is a direct reflection of the landscape. She's cold, she's indifferent, and she demands absolute ruthlessness from her children if they wish to survive.
Wow.
Right, because when you have an environment of absolute scarcity and constant lethal danger, it fundamentally rewrites the moral code of the people inhabiting it.
It has to, right?
It has to. You simply cannot afford the luxury of what we would call humanitarianism when stepping outside without the proper layers means death in a matter of minutes.
Which brings up a really fascinating point about I guess you'd call it the thermodynamics of morality.
Oh, I like that phrase, thermodynamics of morality.
Right, because in our modern reality, where we enjoy massive technological abundance, I mean, we have climate-controlled homes, global supply chains, modern medicine compassion is virtually free.
Yeah, it's easy to be nice when you're warm.
Exactly.
Right.
Or at the very least, it is heavily subsidized by the infrastructure around us. But in a world where calories are literal life, burning your own energy to help another person is biological treason.
That's a great way to put it. Biological treason.
Which brings us to our deeply flawed protagonist, Conrad Arflame. He is a 35-year-old ice ship captain, but when the narrative actually begins, he has hit absolute rock bottom.
Yeah, things are not going well for him.
Understatement. He has lost his command because his ship was sold out from under him to a rival city. Now, to understand the gravity of this, you really have to think about it. It's not like losing a job today. You don't just update your resume.
No, not at all.
It's closer to being excommunicated in the Middle Ages.
Mhm.
He hasn't just lost a title. He has been stripped of his utility in a world where utility is the literal only currency keeping you alive.
And his reaction to that loss is incredibly revealing. I mean, instead of fighting to regain his status or, seeking an alternative path within the societal structure, Arflane decides to handle this profound setback by strapping on his skis and heading out into the deadly frozen wasteland entirely alone.
Which is just wild.
Right. He is essentially submitting himself to the judgment of the environment, letting fate decide if he should continue breathing.
Just going out there to die, basically.
Exactly. And the study analyzes this under the broader theme of decadence and survival. The society living on this ice plateau is characterized as deeply stagnant and profoundly brutal.
Stagnant being the key word.
Yeah, it is a culture built entirely on rigid traditions of self-preservation. There is zero social safety net. If you lose your ship, if you lose your defined role, you just become dead weight.
Wow.
So Arflane's decision to ski out into the wastes isn't an act of clinical depression as we might diagnose it today. The study argues it is a culturally conditioned response to losing his place in a razor-thin margin of survival.
So he is literally just following the programming of the Ice Mother to its logical, fatalistic conclusion.
Precisely that. This stagnant society has survived for an untold number of generations, specifically because they do not deviate from these harsh traditions.
Right.
Innovation, empathy, or deviation, they're incredibly dangerous variables when your survival margins are that thin. The collective cannot afford individual weakness.
Which is what makes the inciting incident of this entire narrative so shocking.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
Because Arflane is out there on the ice for 6 agonizing days. And I want you to really think about that. That is 6 days of absolute isolation, freezing winds, likely suffering from severe caloric deficit and hallucinations.
He's on death's door.
He's just waiting for the end. And then he stumbles across a dying man in the snow. Now, the absolute ironclad rule of his people dictates that you leave that man to his fate. You could serve your own fading energy.
You walk away.
Right. But Arflane rescues him. Now, as I was reading this part of the analysis, I genuinely struggled with the scale of this. Because from our perspective, Arflane's grand heroic transformation begins by simply doing the bare minimum of human decency.
Right.
He just chooses not to let someone freeze to death. It feels almost, I don't know, underwhelming to call that a rebellion.
It is a common initial reaction for a modern reader, for sure, but the study urges us to completely detach from our contemporary moral framework. We really have to look at the economics of his choice.
The thermodynamics again.
Exactly. By giving this stranger his own warmth, Arflane is actively inviting frostbite. By sharing his meager rations, he is accelerating his own starvation.
So it's an active sacrifice.
A massive one. Rescuing this dying man is not an act of casual kindness. It is an act of defiance of the core ethos that has kept humanity alive on this frozen rock. He is committing a crime against the survival of the species by valuing a single failing life over the rigid rules of the Ice Mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is why the text marks this specific, grueling act of compassion as the fracture point for his deep structural transformation.
So he breaks the ultimate taboo.
He does.
And as it turns out, the universe has a very strange sense of irony, because this isn't just a random hunter he pulls out of a snowdrift.
Yeah.
The man he saves is an oligarch named Pyotr Rorsev.
Yeah, of course it is.
Right. He is a man of immense wealth and power within the hierarchy of the 8 cities.
A figure who literally represents the very pinnacle of the society that just discarded Arflame.
It's exactly. But despite the monumental effort Arflane exerts to save him, Rorsevny's injuries and exposure are just too severe. He ultimately dies.
Yeah, he doesn't make it.
However, before he succumbs, he leaves a will. And this is the pivot point where this study notes the narrative shifts from a bleak, solitary survival tale into a sweeping, mythic quest.
It completely changes genres almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the oligarch leaves Arflane his incredibly valuable ice schooner, but it comes with a monumental condition. He straps Arflane with a mission to find the legendary, mythical city of New York.
And New York, in the context of Moorcock's world, is not a set of geographical coordinates. I mean, the study emphasizes that it has become a pure myth. It is their Atlantis, or, El Dorado.
A fairy tale.
Exactly. To the people of this far future ice age, New York is a legend whispered about in the dark. It's a symbol of an ancient time before the eternal winter, a time when humanity supposedly ruled the elements rather than cowering from them. So handing Arflane this ship and this specific mission is the equivalent of handing someone a map to the Garden of Eden and demanding they sail off the edge of the world to see if it actually exists.
Think about the narrative weight of that transition. By choosing to show one tiny spark of empathy in a world of absolute zero, Arflane is suddenly burdened with the heaviest responsibility imaginable.
Yeah, the irony is thick.
He went out onto the ice to die quietly, And the consequence of his compassion is that he now has to lead a massive expedition into the absolute unknown. It completely subverts the idea that no good deed goes unpunished. Here, the good deed forces you to carry the weight of a myth.
It is the defining burden of the hero archetype. The study really dives into this. The moment you prove you possess the moral fortitude to look beyond your own immediate selfish survival, the narrative demands that you carry the hopes of the collective.
Even if they don't want you to.
Exactly, even if that collective doesn't yet realize they need hoping for.
Which sets up the sheer logistics of the voyage itself. And looking at the science fiction elements and the regressed technology detailed in the study, the world-building mechanics here are just fascinating.
They're so cool.
Yeah. The primary mode of transport across this frozen wasteland are the ice ships. We are talking about massive, multi-masted sailing vessels, but instead of cutting through water, they are mounted on colossal metal skis.
It is a striking visual, but the study does actually include a critical section on the scientific accuracy, or rather, the intentional lack thereof.
Oh yeah, the physics don't work at all.
Not even a little bit. The analysis makes it very clear that this concept is pure fantasy. There is no historical or scientific basis for large, heavy sailing vessels operating on skis via wind power in this manner.
I mean, the friction alone.
Exactly. The friction coefficients, the weight distribution required to prevent the ice from cracking under the runners, the sheer aerodynamic force needed to move thousands of tons of wood across a solid surface, it completely defies the laws of physics.
Which, frankly, I am entirely fine with.
Me too.
Because the aesthetic choices here are brilliant. The study points out that the setting is deliberately archaic. It is designed specifically to mirror 19th century whaling narratives, but injected with this extreme sub-zero twist.
It's very Moby Dick on ice.
Exactly. You can almost hear the massive wooden hull groaning, the wind howling through the rigging, the metal runners shrieking against the ice. And the author leans into that nautical trope heavily, even introducing land whales.
Yes. The land whales. They are another element where Moorcock prioritizes thematic resonance over, evolutionary biology.
For sure.
The oceans may be frozen solid, but the ecosystem has supposedly adapted to produce massive leviathan creatures that just roam the ice plains.
It grounds the reader perfectly, though. If you're writing a seafaring adventure, you need the looming threat of the Leviathan. It invokes that specific Melville atmosphere, the perilous voyage, the isolation, the sheer insignificance of man against massive beasts.
Right.
But by placing it on a frozen plateau, it constantly reminds the reader that the environment is completely alien.
And building on that thought, the genius of utilizing the 19th century whaling motif is that it instantly establishes a very specific social dynamic.
Oh, the hierarchy.
Yes. A whaling ship was essentially an absolute monarchy. It evokes harsh discipline, long stretches of agonizing boredom punctuated by moments of sheer chaotic terror, and the unquestionable authority of the captain.
Right, because there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere. Once you board that ice schooner, you are severed from the rest of humanity. The ship becomes a microcosm of the society they left behind, but highly pressurized.
And a pressurized environment requires a volatile mix of elements, which brings us to the crew Arflane assembles.
Okay.
Because you cannot embark on an expedition of the damned without a seriously complicated interpersonal dynamic.
Naturally.
We are introduced to what quickly becomes the simmering toxic core of the voyage, which is a love triangle. We have Ulrika Olsen, who is the beautiful daughter of the dead oligarch Warsephne.
Okay.
And she is accompanied by her husband, Janik Olsen, who the text portrays as deeply cowardly, insecure, and just intensely jealous.
Yeah, it is an interpersonal dynamic practically engineered for catastrophic failure.
Consider the reality of that situation for a moment. You are trapped inside a creaking wooden hull. The temperature outside will kill you in minutes. You are navigating a deadly, featureless wasteland with absolutely no hope of rescue if the mast snaps or the runners break.
Total isolation.
And you are confined to these tight, claustrophobic, freezing quarters with the daughter of your benefactor and her wildly paranoid husband. I mean, the tension in that environment is suffocating.
The study actually explores how Moorcock uses this dynamic to create a brilliant narrative mirror.
A mirror? How so?
Well, you have the external physical dangers, the deadly environment, the constant threat of starvation, the terrifying encounters with rival, cannibalistic, ice-faring tribes who view the ship merely as a resource to be harvested.
Right, the immediate threats to life.
Exactly. Those are monumental threats to their physical survival, but those external threats perfectly mirror the internal psychological dangers festering inside the ship's cabin.
I see.
The emotional isolation, the creeping paranoia, The toxic, manipulative dynamics of the love triangle, the freezing indifference of the ice outside is matched by the emotional coldness and cruelty developing within the crew.
So you have this impossible physical environment pressing in on a claustrophobic psychological one. That tension simply cannot hold.
No, it has to break.
And when the dam inevitably breaks, it isn't the hull of the ship that fractures, it is Arflane's morality.
Yeah, things get really dark here.
The extreme environment forces him to make increasingly dark, extreme choices. As the voyage progresses, the study explicitly notes that Arflane engages in adultery with Orica. He exhibits calculating acts of cruelty toward Janek and others, and he repeatedly defies his society's ingrained codes of conduct.
The narrative takes a really sharp turn away from the standard triumphant adventure arc right here. I mean, Arflane sheds the mantle of the stoic, noble captain and begins to act in ways that are deeply unsettling to the reader.
I have to admit, I really struggled with this progression.
It's tough to read.
It is. I found myself questioning the authorial intent. We have a protagonist who initiates this entire grand quest by performing an ultimate act of selfless compassion. He saves a dying man.
Right.
And yet, halfway through the journey, he is actively tearing apart a marriage, he's humiliating his subordinates, and he's acting with a ruthlessness that borders on downright villainy. So is this just inconsistent character writing, or is there a specific mechanism driving this descent?
It is definitely a deliberate and vital mechanism. The friction you are feeling as a reader is exactly what Moorcock intends.
Okay, walk me through that.
To understand why Arflane behaves this way, the study introduces a concept that is foundational to nearly all of Moorcock's literature. It's the eternal champion archetype.
The eternal champion.
Yes. Now, if you are not deeply familiar with his broader multiverse, the eternal champion is a recurring, tragic figure. This archetype is not a knight in shining armor.
Definitely not.
He is a solitary, brooding, and profoundly self-destructive entity who is constantly reincarnated across different dimensions. He is taxed by the cosmos to restore balance between the forces of law and chaos, but he rarely finds joy in the duty.
He's just a tool for the universe.
Exactly. He is both a savior and a source of absolute ruin. He is doomed to fight, to struggle, and to suffer, but he is fundamentally denied the comfort of lasting peace.
So Arflane isn't just a ship captain dealing with a mutinous crew. He is a cosmic wrecking ball.
That's perfect. A cosmic wrecking ball.
He is a blunt instrument of fate designed to smash the existing order.
And the study provides a really profound textual analysis of this exact dynamic. It posits that Arflane is becoming a catalyst. The text specifically refers to him as a, quote, harbinger of change on a massive fundamental scale.
Let's examine the mechanics of that, a harbinger of change on a massive scale. Because if we look back at the society he originated from, that 8 cities culture, entirely stagnant, frozen in time, built exclusively on the rigid traditions of immediate self-preservation.
Right, the Ice Mother's rules.
Exactly. How do you actually enact change in a system that is flexible? You certainly cannot do it politely. You can't petition a council or write a sternly worded letter.
Yo, they just let you freeze.
Right. In a world completely encased in ice, physical and metaphorical, sometimes the only way to induce a thaw is by shattering the foundation.
And that is precisely the psychological framework the study applies to his cruelty and his adultery. Janek Olsen, the cowardly husband, he represents the old, clinging, fearful ways of the stagnant society.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, he represents a desperate desire to turn back, to hide behind the walls, to maintain the status quo. So Arflane dismantling Janek's authority and his marriage is a microcosm of Arflane dismantling the rigid, suffocating rules of the ice culture.
Wow.
His actions are undeniably destructive. But in Moorcock's universe, and arguably in the broader scope of history, destruction is the unavoidable prerequisite for creation. Arflane has to break the moral codes of the Ice Mother to free humanity from her grip.
That reframes his entire descent for me.
Yeah.
The cruelty isn't just a character flaw. It is the literal manifestation of a stagnant world finally cracking open under unimaginable pressure.
Yes.
His internal chaos is the engine driving the ship forward. It is his relentless, destructive energy that is propelling the expedition through the most dangerous ice, pushing them further than any human has dared to venture in millennia, and driving them inexorably toward their mythic destination.
And it is that relentless, self-consuming drive that miraculously brings them to the climax of the narrative. Because against all rational odds, the expedition actually reaches the coordinates.
Which brings us to the ontological shock of the discovery itself.
Yeah.
Because the imagery Moorcock uses when they finally reach their goal is staggering. They find New York.
They actually find it.
They find it.
Yeah.
But it is not the neon-lit, towering metropolis of glass and steel that we recognize. The study details a haunting, legendary ruined city that is entirely buried under the eternal ice canopy.
It is a moment of profound discovery that is completely stripped of the triumphant fanfare you might expect from a treasure hunt. It is eerie, silent, and deeply unsettling for the characters.
I mean, imagine the sheer scale of that environment. You have a far future civilization that has only ever known a flat, white desert.
Just endless ice.
Right. And suddenly, they discover they are walking on a frozen canopy hundreds of feet in the air, and beneath them are the tips of ancient skyscrapers protruding into the ice.
It's such a surreal image.
Imagine finding the frozen spire of the Chrysler Building. Because they have absolutely no historical context for what a commercial office building is, they don't see zoning laws and real estate. They view these colossal spires of steel as profound, incomprehensible religious artifacts. They're walking atop the graves of gods.
That is a very powerful way to visualize the existential dread of this scene. The study analyzes the discovery of New York not merely as a physical location on a map that has been checked off, but as a shattering of their entire worldview.
It has to be, right? It changes everything.
Absolutely. For these characters, the city serves as a dual symbol. First, it is a haunting, undeniable proof of a lost past. It is physical evidence of a time when humanity did not cower from the cold, but actually built monuments that scrape the sky.
It proves the Ice Mother was not always the supreme ruler of the earth.
Right.
It destroys the myth of permanence. If the past was completely different, then the present reality is just a temporary weather anomaly in the grand scheme of geological time.
Exactly. And that leads to the second part of the symbol. It represents a potential future.
Because if it changed once,
It can change again. If the ice was not eternal in the past, it implies that the ice does not have to be eternal moving forward. It completely rewrites their understanding of reality.
wow.
And the study connects this deeply to the theme of the quest as redemption. When Arflane first skied out into the wastes, he was a broken man seeking a quiet death. This entire agonizing journey was never truly about looting gold from frozen bank vaults or mapping new trade routes.
It was personal.
It was a desperate search for meaning. It was a spiritual reckoning to determine if existence could be anything more than just brutal, cold survival.
He needed to dig through the permafrost of his own soul to see if there was anything underneath, just like he needed to dig through the ice of the world to find the city. Finding New York validates that desperate hidden hope. It proves that there is a foundation beneath the freeze.
It does. And from a traditional narrative standpoint, this is the exact moment where the hero gathers the ancient knowledge, turns the ship around, and sails back to his people as a conquering savior.
You'd expect him to bring the fire back.
Right. He returns with the fire to melt the stagnant society.
But Arflane's story takes a violently abrupt left turn right at the finish line. Instead of a triumphant return, we get an ending that the study notes has generated a massive amount of debate, frustration, and critical analysis over the decades.
Yeah, it is an ending that purposefully denies the reader the catharsis they have been conditioned to expect.
So after the expedition reaches this incredible climax in the ghost city of New York, after unearthing the ultimate proof of a world before the ice, Arflane makes an astonishing choice. He chooses not to return with the crew.
He just taps out.
He does not go back to the 8 cities to share this world-shattering revelation and lead his people into a new era. Instead, he simply abandons the ship. He walks away, heading off entirely alone into the deepest, most desolate parts of the freezing wilderness, claiming he is seeking out the ambiguous Ice Mother herself.
He essentially steps off the stage right at the moment the audience expects him to take a bow and deliver his grand monologue.
And the critical reaction highlighted in the source text is fascinating, because the study points out that readers and literary critics frequently attack this ending. They call it a blatant Deus ex machina.
Yeah, I've seen that critique a lot.
They argue it feels incredibly rushed and unearned. And looking at it strictly from a plot perspective, you can see why. You invest hundreds of pages tracking this agonizing, meticulously detailed, brutal voyage, and then the protagonist just vaporizes into the snowstorm.
It is jarring.
It raises a legitimate question. Was Moorcock just bumping up against a publishing deadline? Did he simply not know how to resolve the complex political fallout of Arflane returning with this knowledge? So he chose the easiest exit strategy.
And the study addresses that critique head-on and actually validates the frustration. It acknowledges that from a purely structural standpoint, the text definitely has flaws.
Okay.
It notes that some of the supporting characters remain flat and stereotyped, acting more as thematic props for our flame to bounce off of rather than fully realized humans. And it agrees that the resolution of the physical plot is sudden and, to a modern reader, arguably unsatisfying. It feels like a shortcut.
So it concedes the point.
Partially. However, the study provides a really robust defense of the ending by elevating the conversation from plot mechanics to thematic necessity.
How does the study justify the abruptness then?
By returning to the framework of the eternal champion, we have to remember the core tragedy of that archetype.
Right, the cosmic tool.
Yes. The champion is summoned by the universe to disrupt the stagnant order, to cause necessary chaos to break the wheel. But their ultimate underlying desire is never to rule the new world they create. Their deepest yearning is always to lay down the mantle, to give up the fight, and to finally find rest.
So it is a story about profound existential exhaustion.
Precisely. Arflane has fulfilled his cosmic utility. He rescued the dying oligarch, he shattered the societal taboos, he piloted the schooner through impossible odds, he dismantled the old ways represented by Janek, and he broke the myth of the eternal ice by finding New York.
He did his job.
He acted as the perfect harbinger of change. The chaotic energy he was meant to unleash has been entirely spent. The stagnant society of the 8 cities will never be the same now that the surviving crew knows the truth about the past.
Because they'll go back and tell everyone.
Exactly. Arflane's job is done. He has no desire to return and become a politician, a priest, or a king. He is spiritually drained. He seeks peace. And in the harsh reality of Moorcock's world, the only true lasting peace is found in the silent embrace of the ice. Walking away to find the Ice Mother is his way of finally laying down the sore.
It completely recontextualizes the very beginning of the book. He finally gets to have the ending he was seeking on page 1, when he first skied out into the wastes to die after losing his command.
Yes.
He just had to complete this massive, agonizing, world-altering detour first to earn that rest.
He completes the circle. It is a deeply nihilistic but structurally perfect resolution for his character arc. And this leads us to the final overarching thematic wrap-up provided by the study.
Which is?
Because despite the structural critiques regarding the pacing of the ending or the depth of the secondary characters, the Ice Schooner is ultimately synthesized as an incredibly valuable, gripping narrative. It is considered a highly memorable and vital work within Moorcock's extensive bibliography.
Because it refuses to compromise its bleak vision.
Exactly. Its real power lies in its unflinching grimness. It offers a speculative scenario where humanity's survival is just as bleak, just as hard-fought and terrifying as its prospects for hope.
No fairy tale endings.
None. It doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't offer a shiny, utopian resolution where the ice magically melts and everyone is happy, because the brutal world it portrays simply does not allow for that kind of naive optimism.
Right.
It forces the reader to sit in the discomfort of confronting what happens to the human spirit when the warmth of civilization and the easy morality that comes with it is completely extinguished.
And I think that underlying psychological reality is why this story, despite being set thousands of years in a fictional future on giant wooden ships with metal skis, actually feels incredibly relevant to the human experience right now.
Oh, for sure.
Because as you're listening to this analysis, I want you to consider the ice plateaus in your own life. We all navigate through periods, whether it is in our careers, in our long-term relationships, or in our personal intellectual growth, that feel completely, numbingly stagnant.
Everyone goes through that.
Times when the environment around us feels cold, indifferent, and unforgiving. And during those times, the easiest, safest, most biologically logical thing to do is to simply conform to the rigid traditions of self-preservation. You keep your head down. You don't take unnecessary risks. You conserve your emotional energy, and you just survive.
You adhere to the societal norms of the ice.
Exactly. But the underlying lesson of Arflane's agonizing journey is that sometimes breaking those deeply ingrained rules is the only way to induce a thaw. Sometimes an initial, seemingly reckless act of compassion or a terrifying leap into the unknown is required to break the stasis.
You have to risk it.
You have to be willing to cause a little chaos, disrupt your own comfortable status quo, and risk the perilous voyage if you ever want to unearth your own personal New York, whatever that profound revelation or spiritual awakening might look like for you.
It serves as a really powerful, haunting metaphor for the cost of personal transformation. And, Looking at the sheer scale of the world Moorcock created, it leaves me with a final, lingering thought experiment inspired by the study's focus on the ghost city.
Was here.
It's something for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We spent a lot of time analyzing how the frozen ruins of New York served as an ontological shock to this future society, a physical relic that completely shattered how they understood their world and their history.
Right.
So I want you to extrapolate that to your own existence. If your entire life, your values, the culture you live in, and the achievements you hold dear were suddenly buried under an eternal planetary sheet of ice, what single specific relic of yours would you hope a future explorer manages to chip out of the permafrost centuries from now to help them understand what it actually meant to be human in our time?
Man, that is an incredibly heavy concept to wrestle with. A single relic to encapsulate the entirety of our humanity just waiting in the ice. Well, on that provocative note, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the frozen psychological wastes of the ice schooner.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope we managed to bring a little intellectual warmth to the journey. Keep exploring those complex narratives, stay intensely curious, and do not be afraid to question the stagnant rules in your own world. We will catch you on the next deep dive.